Well, good afternoon, Ali Braid. How the devil are you?
I'm really well, thank you. Sharon,
I'm,
how are you?
I'm really good, and I am so excited about today's conversation.
Me
I
too.
think it's going to be a really good one, really important topic. But before we dive in, welcome to the Recruitment Marketing and Sales podcast. And for
Thank
our
you.
listeners, we have the lovely Ali Braid, who runs a training consultancy. Many of you will already know her, and if you don't, then I recommend you get to know her. Um, and Ali's company is the Recruitment Trainer. And I know later, Ali, you're going to tell us a little bit more about what you do in detail. But what I guess is really interesting for listeners is to find out a bit about your background and how did you come to be the recruitment trainer and have your consultancy?
Yeah, of course. Thank you. Um, so my background, I was a temp recruiter
Mhm.
for the finance sector. I had a very brief career as a teacher,
Right.
and very brief of 2 years.
Well, you made it
And
further than
then
I
and then
did
I,
because
I went.
sorry, I was just going to say you made it further than I did because I always wanted to be a teacher, and
Oh, really?
yeah, never made that.
Oh, yeah. Well, and do you know, it was something I thought, for a very long time I wanted to do, from like the age of 5, I was getting my brother to be at school and, giving him sums to do and things. And, the reality was, I realised was maybe not as free and easy as I was hoping.
Right.
So I went into recruitment and yeah, so I was a temp recruiter for 5 years, but actually saw quite quickly, Sharon, that there was that training piece that maybe I could get into,
Hmm.
within that sales environment. And so
Right.
quite quickly in my first year, really, I was like, oh, maybe training's, the way forward. Understandably, though, I needed to be a recruiter first, right? I needed
Yep.
to, I needed to actually recruit
No,
and
you
show I
stuck.
could do that.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and the business I was in created a role for me after it was just under 5 years. So the end of near the end of my 5th year, they went, right, we're ready for another trainer, and I joined actually my old manager who'd interviewed me, and we were the training team. And we were the training team for 5 years, and it was great. Um, and then sort of maternity leave followed. I joined a legal niche recruitment business.
Okay.
And when I left there, I was director of operations. So I
Right.
really got to grips with, a growing business, the
Mhm.
challenges of that,
Mm.
hiring, taking on, well, moving premises. So that was a really good experience from owning a business
Yes.
perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then 7 years ago I left there to set up the recruitment trainer. So yeah,
Fantastic.
that's
And going
it's
from strength to
obviously
strength.
COVID was so well. We touched the wood at that point, Sharon. But yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. I think we all did.
yes, yeah,
It's amazing, isn't it, to think it's kind of like 4 years ago. It's scary. You
yeah,
know, it's
yeah,
so recent, and
absolutely.
yet it feels such a long time ago.
Yes, such a long
Um,
time. I know, I
yeah,
know.
but just thinking about this year. Um,
Yeah,
we're at the start of it, and I know you've kind of like been out and about already with on site with clients, and I've
yeah,
been
that's
having quite
right.
a few
Yeah.
conversations the last week or so with colleagues like ourselves, in that supply part
Mm.
of the market, and it's really interesting. So I think there's a common theme that we're all picking up, that for our clients, business development is a big priority
Mm.
this year.
Yeah,
It's kind of like still, interesting times from a market point of view, very different to the bounce back of 21, 22, and that recognition
yeah,
that, it might be a candidate. We might have all been grappling for candidates, but actually, from a marketing point of view, we need to start thinking about, BD and marketing for
yeah.
clients and candidates as well. So I guess
Yeah.
that just, got me thinking about our conversation today. And in terms of, what, from your perspective, and what you're seeing and experiencing, what are the key challenges that you see recruiters are facing from a BD strategy point of
Yeah.
view right now?
I think, and I love this question, and I do, Sharon, because I think, quite quickly we get into the nub of it. I think there's so many choices now. There's so many choices, I think, for recruiters in terms of marketing, routes to market, getting on people's radar. And I think almost, that technology piece and the marketing piece, I think is almost confusing for people in terms of, is this still how we get to our endpoint of the journey? If we want to attract new clients, new candidates, I feel like that there's sort of the way has been lost slightly, and I don't think that's any particular fault of anything. I think it's a combination of factors.
Factors.
And as you said, having that amazing market in 2022 when everything felt really easy, and then suddenly we go into last year and hang on a minute, well, that's things just aren't being rung in, but we're doing all the same things, so why isn't that working? So I think it's the market. I think there's almost too much choice as well. I mean, I don't know about you. I'm terrible with choice. I'd rather, in a restaurant, there's the 3 things you can order,
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think, as recruiters, there is so much choice from technology, how you contact people, how often you contact people. There's so much automation, which is great. But I think that's also added to the confusion. What do you think? I think there's so much going on now compared to 10
Well,
years
no,
ago.
I think you're
15
right.
years.
I think, for a couple of years, people had it, they're quite comfortable because, everybody was going to them, sort of recruitment company, didn't
Yeah.
they? And that's not the case anymore. And when you've been in your comfort zone and dealing with handling with doing business like that, and then suddenly you're confronted with, well, hang on a minute, people aren't coming to us anymore. So what do we do? And I think, it's a really great point about the choices from a tech stack and different approaches that people have got available to them. Sometimes what I think that can lead to is, people can dip their toe in the water with one thing and make some quick judgments about, well, that's not worked. I've given it a go for, a
Yes.
month
Yeah.
and it's not worked. So I'm going to go and try this. And then I'll give that a go for a short time. And of course, that's not working quite fast enough because we're also impatient, aren't we? In terms of wanting,
Yes.
responses and results. And the reality is that we forget that we can get quicker results from a warmer audience. But if we're going out to a cold audience, it's cold. They're not going to know us. And so it's going to take a bit longer. That impatience, I think, kicks in. So what I think sometimes what we don't do is say, right, okay, we're going to use this, and this. We're going to put a process together and we're going to work that process and stick with it. And I sometimes kind of find people, stop too soon and make a judgment that something's not worked rather than kind of like seeing something through. I think that's something that we often, come across. I mean,
The
there's
need.
some of kind of like the mistakes that I see is making that judgment too quick, not staying with it, flitting. I mean, what about you? What are the mistakes that you see from a BD point of view?
Yes. And similar, especially when it comes to, looking at a BD strategy. And I think you're right, it's expecting results to just come in. I've rang them this week, so they're going to call in a job next week,
Yeah.
And I think it's that need for instant gratification which actually kind of prevents the real activity. Because like you see, Sharon, with the marketing side, people do a little bit of that and a little bit of that. But there's not the continuity of activity. And that is a challenge, isn't it? I mean, you and I know that's, continuity in anything. It is a challenge, isn't it, for all of us? But actually having that plan and executing that plan, no matter what, and doing it for a period of time.
Yes.
And I think, I always say this when I'm training, if you're expecting things to happen instantly, this is not the job for you. This is not the career for you.
Yeah.
Is it? You have to, like you said, you have to have the patience.
You do. You do. And I think, if people have their early experience of the industry has been let's say 2022, then it's kind of like almost like a false reality in a way, isn't it? And it must kind of like feel for people who are newer to our industry, sort of thinking, this is not the job that I thought it was. It's not the job I've been doing for the last 2 years. There's something I'm having to like relearn. What to do almost. I mean, you've mentioned about automation. There's lots of benefits to automation, as we both know, and it brings its challenges as well. And I guess, as over time, what we've seen is with the growth of online, with that amazing tool that LinkedIn can be. That I guess there's been a shift, hasn't there, in terms of perhaps some of the strategies that many people will have been brought up on in the industry compared to how they're perhaps how they're working now. So just for example, I seem to have quite a number of calls at the back end of last year with business owners who said to me, I realise how I used to do BD has changed. And with everything online, there's lots that I know I can do, but I'm not quite sure where to start with it all. And that comes from a marketing perspective, but also then how do they blend that with their sales approach? Because it's for some people it has been literally a case of sitting on the phone and just hitting the phone. For people newer to our industry, it's sitting on LinkedIn and hitting LinkedIn, isn't it? So I guess my question is, how from your point of view, with all your experience and what you teach, what approach is going to work today, and is it possible to blend what some might think as the old, the phone, with the new, and all the elements of that?
With the new.
I know that's a big question.
No, I like it though. No, and actually I get asked this a lot, because I think, as you said, there's sort of that view of certainly maybe people in their 30s or 40s who had to be on the phone like me, and you were on the phone for 6 hours a day and there was no other option. And then, as you say, you've got what's available now, which is your emails and your marketing and taking people on that journey. I very much believe, Sharon, that you can and should do both, because what each of those sort of different communication styles, if you like, allows you to do is to back up one with the other. So if you're saying in your marketing, look, we're great, we have all these brilliant candidates, if you then have a conversation about a brilliant candidate and you've sent some marketing material out and you've shown your product, but you've also had that human to human element, for me, that's the best approach, because actually, we talk about tools, don't we, and what's in our toolkit, and especially in training, and for me, having a conversation is another tool. It's not necessarily the best tool, or it depends what you're trying to achieve, but it is a tool. So let's include it in that strategy. And I think it's making sure that, as you said, it is combined. It's not an add-on or a, oh God, we should ring some people today. You know, it's well thought out, and both parts support each other.
Yes.
Because then that journey that you're taking that person on makes absolute sense, doesn't it then?
Completely.
And then you're getting into here. Sorry, folks, I'm pointing at the noggin. You know, it really means that you're going to be remembered for both of those activities, I think.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting, somebody mentioned to me the other day when we were chatting about this, that of course, let's be really clear, when you talk about, you know, having a conversation, my understanding of that is a verbal conversation, not a message. You know, there's a time when a verbal conversation is required, and that can either be, you know, a Zoom, an interview, an audio, whatever video software you're using,
absolutely,
Teams, whatever, or it's a phone. It's actually a phone call. I know some people say, "Can we just do the phone because, you know, I need a break from Teams." That's fine. No, but I guess if we're reaching out, yes, you can do a video outreach from a BD point of view, absolutely, and I think they're great. And yet sometimes the phone to do some of that outreach, that's the bit that sometimes I kind of like, you know, sense and pick up that there's a bit of reluctance. I don't know if that's something that you find.
Yes, and I think, you know, if we're all being honest with ourselves, we probably all have a slight reluctance, don't we? You know, I think when I think back to, you know, the way I use a phone, right? And I'll give myself as an example. I don't use the phone in the way that I did 5 years ago, 10 years ago, you know? So I think the way we use our phones has changed. I think it has changed. And I think that's kind of another ingredient into this sort of, oh, should we do it? Shouldn't we do it? Because actually we have got out the habit of using it. Just personally, you know, ringing friends, ringing family, you know, we've got a family WhatsApp group, you know. So so it's and I do believe for business and for, you know, for recruiters and for our industry, that is part of the challenge. And I get that because it's, you know, it feels a bit of a challenge for me, you know, as well. But I think it's almost, I think we're at the point now where, you know, we need to kind of get over it a little bit, I think. And just, you know, introduce it into our daily lives almost, you know, and ring your sister and ring your friend, and, you know, because the forming of bonds, you know, and there's been lots of research around this as well, actually, that, you know, you can create a very well crafted email. So imagine that, you know, also having a human to human conversation, you know, and for me, that's the powerful thing. And it moves things forward, doesn't it? It's going to move those relationships forward if we do it in the right way, of course.
Yes. No, absolutely.
But I think it is a challenge.
And so, I mean, you know, if your ideal, as you described, is being able to blend the online kind of like resources that we do have with, you know, having that, you know, one-to-one conversation. I mean, I guess at some point, generally a purchasing decision is often made on the back of a conversation. Generally, I'm not going to say every time.
No.
What do we do about that then? If there is this element of reluctance, because, you know, you're right, you're absolutely right. You know, when I think about how, you know, my use of the phone, it has changed, and sometimes I'll message when, you know, before I would have called and had a very quick 2-minute call, but you
Yeah.
just bang a message, don't we? So
Yeah.
if the ideal is that we can blend, you know, that really valuable use of the phone to have that slightly deeper level of conversation to really understand our clients so much more, you know, take a more detailed job brief, understand more about the culture of that organization, all those kind of like elements. What do we do? What do we do to address it? Because I think there is reluctance.
Yes. And my advice, and actually this also comes from having worked in a business where, you know, there was that, not necessarily a reluctance. I think that's probably a bit unfair, but certainly the habit wasn't there anymore.
Right.
And as you said, it was on
That's a good way of
emails
describing
and
it.
LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And look, you know, this is what we do. And I remember being in the office, and I hadn't been in the business very long, and it was really quiet. And I'd come from, you know, big sales floor of, you know, 100 people where most people were on the phone for most of the time, you know. So it was dead. It was just, to me, it was deathly quiet. And I remember saying to one of the MDs, you know, what are they all doing? You know, and they were messaging and they were emailing. So, you know, that was really the beginning of, look, we're going to be missing out on business here. You know, we can't attract and engage and create momentum just on email. You know, that is just part of it. So what we did very slowly, Sharon, and you'll have seen this because it is a culture change, right? You are basically saying to people, I know you've always done this, but now we want you to do this. Right? So it's got to be gradual, I think. And I think it's something you can make fun. And, you know, we don't have to go back to it's a BD power hour. We're going to, you know, it can be 10 minutes. You know, it can be 15 minutes, 20 minutes if you're all in the office together. And even if you're not, actually, because I've got clients that do it from home too. Right. We're going to do our 20 minutes now, you know, feedback in 20 minutes. Good luck, guys. You know, off you go kind of thing. So I think, you know, that moving away from we've got to be at this for hours on end, because that's not motivational for anybody. Give each other live feedback. You know, I think that really helps. You know, great, that worked really well. Oh, that sounded a bit tricky. You know, how did that go? You know, so sort of doing that coaching, but everyone does it, right? You can all help each other. I think little and often is the key, as well. And that consistency, like we've said. So it's no good doing it once a week for 4 weeks. You've got to do it once a week, you know, forever now, to see, you know, to get that return. And it's that being proactive, and also, you know, target your targets. You know, I think, again, we need to move away from this. Right, well, I've got a list of 300. You know, that's the email list. We've got 300. Okay, but, you know, realistically, how many of those could we service? You know, let's actually get really picky, for want of a better word, in terms of who we want to approach and who we want to work with. Because actually 30 new contacts feels a lot more doable and achievable than 300. You might get to 300 in a few years' time, mightn't you? But, you know, let's be really targeted, because that's easier to manage. You'll get penetration for sure if you're consistent, and you'll very quickly start to see what works. But you'll also be able to work with them rather than thinking, oh my God, I've now got 300 new clients to service. You know, let's be realistic about it.
No,
so those would be my key things.
And I like those because they're practical, aren't they? It's like, you know, bite-sized chunks, small steps. You know, change is kind of like easier in those small steps. People can like see that, oh right, well actually, you know, this is what I can do in 20 minutes, or, you know, if I've got a manageable number of potential leads that I want to really focus on, then it makes it easier, doesn't it, to certainly in my very simple brain, it makes it easy to think, well, okay, I've got 30 people to call, then I could drop a a LinkedIn message to those 30 people to let them know that I left them a voicemail.
Yeah.
And then I can,
Yeah.
and so it's easy for me to manage those 30
Yes.
people that through a
Yeah.
process and through a follow-up
Yeah.
process, because we both know the stats, don't we, on unfortunately how many people don't do follow up, beyond the second or
Follow-up.
third thing.
Yes.
And yet we
Yeah.
know that the sale, I mean, today, we need so many more touch points to get that conversion, don't we?
Yeah.
Than we've ever
Well,
needed.
now, this is it. And I think, I'm sure you've seen this. You've probably got actual real stats on this, Sharon, but, you read, don't you? Oh, it's 5 touches before they say yes to something. Some things you read, it's 15. Basically keep going. I always say to people, until you hear that yes, and you want a yes, you've targeted them because you want that yes, you keep going, and eventually that yes will come, won't it?
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I've even heard one sales trainer saying, and even when they say no, then I just keep going. I just, I leave them for a month, and then I just keep going. So that might make me laugh.
Absolutely.
So I mean, I guess one of the things that I was, thinking about, but I think you've already answered it really in terms of, what do we miss out on when we're not using that phone? But I think you referred to the fact that we don't get to that deeper level of conversation and hence, I guess, relationship, and so we're potentially missing out, aren't we?
Yeah, I think so. And actually, if I always think as well in terms of, it's, yes, from a sales perspective, you want to uncover problems and pains. And of course, we need to do that. But actually, for me, I think what's the most powerful, and when I hear people do this, it's the nuances in a conversation. It's what people don't say. And what they have said, and what's that gap in the middle, and I was always told, and I still do it now to a degree, well, they haven't mentioned this, and I know this, but they've not mentioned that, and they didn't say this, and when they talked about the other agency, they didn't say, and you're almost, it's what isn't said, I think, that's quite often more powerful in terms of, being a service provider. Because you can go, well, hang on a minute, I know that you've worked with so-and-so before, and, you've not really mentioned that. So let's go into that, and they can see, I think, then a number of things, that you care, that you've done this before, even if you haven't, you care enough to ask the difficult questions, and that for me is, as a service provider, which we are, aren't we? Or which, recruiters are, which you are, and I am. It's getting that deeper level of information that allows us to go, well, look, I've got just the thing for you. Just the thing for you. But if we're not having those conversations, I think we miss out on so many details, and so many little clues as to how we can work with that person.
No, I think that makes perfect sense, and I kind of, just thinking about those conversations, and it just made me think about, let's say from a BD point of view, if we've got let's say, a newer member, like a new starter, and then we've got, the more experienced members in the team, from a BD point of view, how might approaches change if they need to? So if you've got someone that's obviously been around for a lot longer, they've got more skills, then they can do those deep dive conversations potentially a little bit easier, can't it? Whereas this person's learning. So what's the approach that you kind of like suggest?
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think they do need to be different. And I think what often happens, understandably, I think people go from being very new and therefore very planned and prepared, and I want to find out this, this, and this, and these are my objectives, to a couple of years down the line, well, I know them. I'm just going to wing it. I'm just going to check in and, see what's changed. And suddenly what they find is that actually that's when the billings start to drop, because they are not asking, they're not asking anything really. So they're not doing that deep dive. They're not asking for information. They're not saying, look, we last spoke a few months ago, what's changing? What's new for 2024? They're not really servicing that client. It becomes very transactional, and I'm just checking in, any jobs for me? No, okay, fine, I'll talk to you next month, So actually, I think the challenge when you're more experienced is to have new things to talk about, but actually, make it interesting for you, just as much as for the other person. But make it business related, have objectives, and, really still get into the deep levels of that organization, because if we're just assuming everything's the same all the time, it always bites us in the bum. Always. Oh yeah, well, we've just used that agency. You didn't ask me, or you didn't ring me that week, so I just and that's when the relationships, you realize, are not maybe as strong as you thought they were.
And I think that's what you've described there. I think what it probably makes me think about is that that contrast between transactional and a true partnership, where you've got a seat at the table, and you're not phoning up for a job order. You're phoning up to understand what came out of the strategic planning meeting. What does that mean for workforce development? What does that mean for succession planning, and sort of how does that influence your recruiting strategy? And so it's a very, very different conversation. That's if you want to stand out in the market, there are lots of different things. There's different parts of the mix, that you can work on to stand out. But having a different kind of conversation, I think is one element, because if you have that more strategic understanding, you can actually add more value. There's more consultancy opportunities that that you can build into your service. So I guess it all starts with a conversation in a way, doesn't it?
Well, that's it. And I love that, because you're right. It's it can be high level. It can be it can be very strategic and high level, and but ask the questions. Find those things out, because that is all brilliant ways to then present your offering and show them how you can help them achieve those things.
Absolutely. So there's some great suggestions there in terms of how people can get into a deeper conversation, and the kind of things to be asking and looking for. So let's say you're a business. Doesn't matter whether you've got a small team or a great team, and you really want to support them to upskill themselves from a BD perspective this year. I guess what you've shared already is step change. Some great ideas for having 20-minute team blasts, things like that. Any other kind of suggestions on what billing managers, owner MDs with smaller teams, what they can do to support their team with BD this year?
I think what I see working really well with my clients is that willingness to make a mistake, feeling comfortable to share those mistakes. So if you're a manager, this isn't I'm not saying people would do this, but again, it's moving away from that old-fashioned, oh, you did that wrong, and almost a telling off, right, in front of everybody. But actually it becomes a learning opportunity, right? It's a learning opportunity. Oh, really sorry, Sharon, that happened to you. That sounded ever so difficult. What, tell us what happened. What were they saying? How can we help? And make it an opportunity to find solutions together. Well, look, if that happened again, team, what would you do? If someone said that to you, how would you handle that? And just have those discussions as a team. But maybe set that up first. So if that's a bit of a change, that's a step change. Have that meeting together and go, look, folks, this is what the plan is. This is why we're doing what we're doing. Share the strategy. Say, look, I want to give you more help. I want you to enjoy this. I want you to do well. So this is what we're going to do, right? We're going to help each other. And if you hear someone struggling, or if someone just, comes off the phone and just, I need to vent, we're going to let people do that, So set that up. But I think also as a billing manager, sharing your stories, because I think what often happens, there's such a gap, isn't there, between someone that's quite new and they're sitting next to their manager who makes it all sound incredibly easy. The phone rings. Oh, hi. Yeah, great to hear from you. Oh, you need XYZ. Great. We'll get on that right away. And what the new person hasn't seen was the 6 years previous that billing manager was doing what they were doing. So there's a real disconnect there. So I think I always recommend to managers that they share almost, well, what was the journey? You've got this great relationship now with that client. How did you get there? And sharing what they did. Well, actually, they were really hard to start with. And I did this, this, and this. And then they gave me my first job. And then we sent so-and-so, so-and-so. Yeah. Oh, great. We sent them, and tell the story so that, I think as a team, everyone then understands. And it goes back to how we started, doesn't it, really?
Yeah.
This is a long game, folks.
Absolutely.
It's a long game. Yeah. And you've got to stick at it, and you've got to have that sense of longevity to see the results. It wasn't always people ringing in, that, what have they done to get to that point? And I think also just being really honest and say, do you know what? Sometimes it's going to feel really hard, and it does for everyone. It just has done for all of us. So, that level of honesty around, we're going to be realistic about this as well. I think helps.
No, I like that, and I like the idea. I think the way that you set that up, it sort of like sets people up for, we're in this for the long game with this relationship. This is not a case of, if they don't have any jobs next week, well, then it's just like a transactional thing, because actually you're setting it up for that more partnership relationship rather than it being transactional, aren't you?
Yes, exactly.
And so I think that's really great. So listen, I mean, I know we can both carry on talking about this for ages, can't we? But, that you've shared some really sort of like great ideas there. How do people find out more about you and what you do? And I guess what's your focus? What are you working on with clients? This year.
Yeah, sure. So, and thank you. Yeah. So my real focus actually is sort of the BD side for this year, because as you know, and as you all know now, dear listeners, it is a passion of mine, because I know it works. I see it working, all the time with my clients. So if people want to get in touch, if they want to have a chat with me, if they are experiencing some of those challenges, that we've talked about, I am on LinkedIn. Ali Braid, the recruitment trainer. I do also have a website, so you can also contact me through there, which is therecruitmenttrainer.co.uk. You can call me. That would be good. Exactly. And yeah, I think my focus, I mean, as you know, I work, with everyone from someone in, week one, year one, all the way up to business owner, and all types of experience in between. But yeah, the BD is definitely a focus, and like you, people are saying that's something that they are looking to do more of this year, and specifically get on the phone. So I've got an online course now, that's got a group element.
Excellent.
So I'm trying to combine that community kind of element and group learning and chances for questions and sharing, but also you've got everything you need as well, on the system, and you work through the modules. But I'm also there if you need any one-to-one time. But the group is there too.
Fantastic, excellent. So listen, thank you so much for joining us today, and I know people can take away some real gems from what you shared, so thank you for that. And and if you or your team are struggling with sort of BD strategy, then reach out and have a conversation.
That's what we want.
Absolutely. Listen,
Thank
have
you
a great
so much.
day, Ali. You're welcome. Talk soon.
Thank you. All the best. Bye.
All the best then.